Denise, are you gonna have a? Are you gonna have a hand?
special call meeting for June 5th. We have quorum. There's only one board member absent. No one present for public forum. And we'll begin with the agenda prep for June 19th, our regular scheduled meeting.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, good evening. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We will begin the June 19th, 2023 board meeting with the election of the school board officers, item 4. After that, finance, item 5, and item 6 will have the public hearing to discuss the proposed tax rate for 2023-2024, and public hearing to discuss the proposed budget for 2023-2024. Tonight we do have a representative from Moke Casey who will be on Zoom to kind of talk about where finance is at the state level and how that could impact us, and Ms. Garcia will walk you through that. We'll have item 8A, Board of Trustees, an update by the Redistricting Committee progress update. Item 8B, Mr. Wozniak, under Operations Update, will present a Safety and Security Initiatives update. Item 8C, Finance. Both of these are new, based on new laws, where we have been presenting updates of the ESSER 3 update, the federal funding that we received. It's all on our website. We have done a really good job, the team has. But we also now have to notify y'all about the federal grant applications that we have. So Title I, Title II, and several others that we have to make sure we meet the deadlines for federal regulations. Under item 9, approval of consent agenda items, we have item A, the approval of the minutes for regular scheduled board meeting on April 17, 2023, the regular scheduled board meeting on May 15, 2023, and special call board meeting on June 5th, 2023. Item 9B, the approval regarding the optional flexible school day program for the 2023-2024 school year at San Marcos High School. I don't know if you want to talk about that right now, that way.
How are we changing it?
We're not changing it. It still operates as the Phoenix program. We are taking some possibilities about relocating off of San Marcos High School, but it would still be the same application to be where it's flexible for students to receive benefits and those route with this would be certain students who have babies work full time or not successful in 2 to 5 credits and a self-paced further education and online platform.
So we are looking, we have been in conversation with some community partners about potentially relocating Phoenix and tying in a career technology, the ability to provide more robust career technology services. We also looked at this program being back at Rebound, in that half of the building it used to occupy. When we moved them onto campus, so the board members know, when we moved them back in 2017, we had to meet requirements for career technology. Then the pandemic hit in 2020, and everybody went to computer-based instruction. And so now there is the ability to service kids with career technology, which will allow us to open up space here at the campus. I think, actually, you, Dr. Salmi, had asked a year ago about potentially moving them back off campus. So we are exploring those options right now.
Who oversees the Phoenix program currently?
It's currently the high school administration that oversees the Phoenix program, and they have 4 teachers that are assigned, and we're just Phoenix, so they oversee the students.
Is there an administrator specifically assigned to Phoenix?
There is all the administrators, and it is their mom.
Okay.
Kate Shaver also oversees like the curriculum to ensure that you're on pace with what they need to do. She oversees all administration.
Okay.
But yes, if it's off, there is staff that are already assigned to that program that would have to follow them.
So are we looking at moving them this coming school year?
Yes.
Okay, the budget looks
Would
mighty small.
requires board approval.
Yeah, Gary Job Corps has said that they have space available in their facility, but we have to have more in-depth instruction before we would bring that back to you.
And if they were to rebound, it would just be the teachers that are assigned to units with them, so it wouldn't be addition. Just this, we have the space over there. We just need to make sure that that happens.
We provide bus services for these kids, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
So rebounds is an option.
The Lamar
Yes.
building that was.
The Lamar building,
Lamar.
yes.
Originally housed the Phoenix program
Correct.
exclusively.
And currently, a lot of those students, honestly, they're in the Phoenix program, they do visit, the reference center and talk to them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the building was intended for
Visit
that
or get
program when
assigned?
it was built.
They're assigned, they get infractions that assign them there, so, we would hope that this would decrease that.
Okay.
Around the area that they would have as large of a
We have a counselor at rebound.
Yes.
They would be in one half, they would be in one hall separate, and then there would be the office location of all the students that are around the other end. So they wouldn't enter during, they would go to lunch at different times, they would not be together.
The-
Yes.
For special education, the 18 plus program crossroads,
So
move them to a different location.
they have been moved already, that's what I was gonna ask. Okay.
That's contingent on us moving Crossroads as well.
Right.
It's all gonna be, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item 9C, approval of instructional materials allotment and TEAG certification. It's something that we have to go through every year. And Mr. Nevada's will have, if you have any questions about that. Item D, consideration and possible approval of policy update 120. That was sent to y'all. There's videos on the updates. So for the new trustees, if it's legal, there's really no discussion. It's legal, that's the law. Really local policies where we control that. But this is their policy update. Item 9E, the approval of the contract with Longhorn Bus Sales for the purchase of 6 school buses as part of the bond. Since the bond actually passed, we're putting this under consent since, well, they voted it. So we should have no really big discussions about that.
Mr. Sandoval, I do have a question though regarding buses. I know you had looked into electric buses. Is that an option for us? Is the cost still exorbitant?
Pretty expensive and the infrastructure we have.
It'd be expensive to set them up.
They're
Understood.
twice the cost right now.
6 buses that we bought with the 2017 bond, $753,000, these same 6 buses.
And we have applied for federal grants, but it always comes down to the infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you.
Item 9F, the approval of contract with TF Harper by board number 679-22 in the amount of $251,937.98 for the installation of ADA accessible playground equipment on all SMCISD elementary campuses as part of the 2017 supplemental bond project.
And I'll be giving you more detail on operations.
Item 9G, approval of contract with Ramtech Building Systems, TIPS 210-202 in the amount of $245,142 for the purchase and installation of 2 portable buildings to be utilized for the SMCISD Crossroad Program and for SMCISD transportation as part of the 2017 supplemental bond projects.
Where would we put the Crossroads? Where would we be putting the ones used for Crossroads?
Near where the old central office is, on that corner, so they can access the transportation hub that's walkable right across, right next to Victory Cleaner.
So
Yeah.
near El Centro? Would-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In that lot that's back
That we
there.
still own? Okay.
They have to have the ability to get to every bus route, and that's the closest location it's our property.
can I ask where this move originated? Who recommended this move in this location? Was it from the program or from the administration?
I think it was both. I think with what we wanted to try to do with the meetings program, that we want to have as an option. So it was discussed at Crossroads.
Mhm.
The Crossroads has always been about making one of our, we'd like to have our facility, we'd like to make it central.
Okay.
That would help our students get on
Mhm.
transportation, access to all the resources. So
Okay.
it really, it was true administration.
We tried to, back before COVID, the board tried to give me the authority to move quickly, but you know, real estate sells really fast and boards don't move. We're not geared to move as quick in the real estate market. So Ms. Griffith, when she was a chief financial officer, we actually looked at multiple properties trying to purchase them. We just never could, and this probably is the most economical that gets them what they need near where they need it to be pretty quickly.
The SPED director directs the Crossroads program, correct?
Ms. Frank, yes.
Got her name, appreciate that.
Item 9H, approval of contract with A1 Glass Coating for the purchase and installation of intruder-resistant film at all required locations. It's bulletproof glass, so.
30 extra cents per student is gonna buy it.
Yes. Item 9I, consider approval of purchasing cooperative interlocal purchasing agreements and state contract list 2023-2024. Item 9J, consider approval of awarded contracts for fine arts supplies and academic services. I believe last year Mr. Underwood brought this to you, kind of the same thing, so we can,
Can you briefly explain what is included in a purchasing cooperative versus what isn't? So I noticed that there's. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
contracts are done, all the legal stuff is done. It's just a lot more efficient.
I was just curious why that there is not a fine arts supply in the cooperative, right? That there's this next item that's a different one. Okay. Okay, so it could be the value of the contract, okay. Thank you.
Item 9K, approval of resolution acknowledging review and approval of investment policy strategy.
Any major changes this year, or even minor? Okay, thank you.
Item 10, items for action under A, Board of Trustees consider approval of the 2023-2024 board meeting calendar. And item 10A2, consider approval of TASB delegate and an alternate TASB delegate. Item B under operations, number 1, consider and possible action to approve the architects for the various 2023 district-wide bond construction and renovation projects. And then item 2, consider approval of the Marshall TASB policy language. Item C for finance. Item 1, consideration and possible action to adopt the 2023-2024 budget. Item C2, consider approval of budget amendments. Yes, we're closing out, so you'll see them all. Item 11, closed session is authorized by section 551.071 and 551.074 of the Texas Education Code and 551.076 of the Texas Government Code. Item A, deliberation regarding safety and security, including safety, personnel systems, infrastructure, and/or devices. Item 11B, discussion regarding superintendent's evaluation. Item 12, open session. The board will reconvene from closed session to take action if necessary on the item discussed in closed session. Item 12A, update on safety and security initiatives district-wide. Item 13, adjourn. Madam President, that's all I have. I will say regarding my evaluation, we finally, thank you to Ms. Nash. Let me just say Elizabeth Nash has the standard TEA wonderful evaluation instrument done. So we put all the data in, but it is from 2022 because that's the data they, yes. So I'll send that to y'all via email so that you can peruse all 9 pages. And it has goals, it has everything, but then I'll have something else in closed session for the board when we're discussing the evaluation. I think goes to what you had asked.
I noticed that there's no academic update on this agenda, and I'm wondering when we're gonna get an academic update for the end of the school year.
You want an update to tell you it's the end of the school year?
Our STAR test scores and things like that.
So well, he's doing his,
September is when, right now, we just have the predictions for the people to pass, but they're not to pass scores of uncertainty.
Mhm. Mhm.
so in my evaluation, you will see raw data, raw scores that
Mhm.
I'll have for y'all, but we literally won't, we don't know what the cut scores are yet. They don't know what the cut scores are. Probably until, we say September, probably October.
Okay.
Everything's being pushed back probably, 3 months? So we're gonna start the year not knowing.
And so we won't have grades. They won't be assigning grades because of the delay.
But we will know how many students didn't meet graduation requirements and what we're doing to get them to complete their credits. for-
Presumably we know that now.
We have the EOC scores so that they're invited to EOC, which started today.
Uh-huh.
And then we have the predictions, whether they pass the uncertainty or to not pass, so that they were invited in grades 3 through 8 to summer school, and they could be invited. And so that's what campus has been using to get them to register school started today.
I-
Zone of uncertainty, actually, like 70 students was maybe in their grade, like 3rd grade, and that's 50% of the students not grade set, and then we don't know if to pass or not pass. It's a big warrant.
Considering we won't have a July meeting, I'd really like to see an academic update that reflects what we know at the end of this school year in June. It can be a written report. It doesn't necessarily need to be a presentation, but I think it's valuable for the board to have some sort of summary of the academic year on an academic standpoint before we break for July.
You are literally gonna get that in my evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
You got a 20-page PowerPoint that's separate.
it'll be included in the board book.
No, not my evaluation, no.
So I think that the academic update should be included and made available to the public at the end of June.
Just so that everybody has time to go over it and look at it in case we have some questions.
Sure,
I
and
can't put my
understandable.
evaluation public.
No.
I'm not asking for your evaluation, I'm
After your
asking for an
evaluation.
academic update based on the school year, right? So completion of students that started and completed the grade, that seems like an appropriate thing to include in an evaluation, I mean, in a summary of the school year. Things like this number of students that started and completed grade levels, things like that. The sorts of academic summary things that you know right now, understanding that we don't have STAR scores.
Talk about
Progress
that
through the
tomorrow.
MAPS tests that we did throughout the course of the year. That's an additional assessment that, that we're opting into, and I think it has value to refresh and to remind our, people who haven't necessarily been seeing those along the way, what the MAPS test is about and how it is intended to be used.
I'd like for it to include how many students did not complete to be able to walk. And those students are currently working on finishing their credits, right?
Yeah. I'd really like to see an academic update at every board meeting. I think that's how we should start every board meeting.
Well, we have to build it into the agenda. Ready for our school board operations next?
Okay, good evening, trustees. I'm gonna use this time to talk about some of the items resolved consent agenda items. And just to recap, on the 27th bond, we came over about $5 million. Can you hear me? Is that good? We came under 5 million, so we had about 5 million to spend. And if y'all can recall, I presented a bunch of projects, quite a few projects, and I've attached them to this presentation. But what I wanted to do is just give you an update on where we are, and then also look at the pending projects, and then some recommendations that we have based off of what has happened with the 2023 bond. So if you want to, I've handed out the presentation for y'all, but if you want to follow along on PowerPoint as well. So those are all the completed projects that we got through with the 2017 supplemental bond. You know, we got the buses, those have been delivered. If y'all recall what happened in Uvalde, a lot of stuff, we started making adjustments with a lot of safety items. We took care of security cameras. We have a fence and a gate project that we're finishing up as well. There's a lot of safety items that we added to this, but the major ones, we got LED lighting for our campuses. We got an additional playground for De Zavala. We got the sunshades out here in the courtyard at the high school. Got some lighting done, and then of course $1 million was set aside for new central office, specifically for the school boardroom, or for the boardroom, and also for school fuel. So the next slide depicts what's still pending. So we had allocated just over 800,000 to redo the band practice lot here at the high school, and then 200,000 for the emergency response radio system. And what that means is that we've already done the analysis, and that's the ability for first responders, when they get into our building, for their radios to be able to communicate. And we've got some dead spots here at the high school that we need to address. We've got an RFP that's going to hit the street, so we can get antennas that will allow them to communicate. As part of the 2023 bond, we're going to also test every one of our middle schools and our elementaries. We started with the high school first because that's obviously our biggest campus, but we will have that RFP out and get those responses so we can get that installed. So with the 2023 bond and the $40 million that has been allocated for the high school, part of that was the whole redesign of outside, right? Getting rid of the roundabouts, looking at doing something over here in the band lot. I just feel that to spend $800,000 on that band practice lot, we'll do that, but we just don't know if it's going to be in that position where it is today. And my recommendation is that we wait and we include that with the 2023 bond, because like I said, we don't know what we're going to use and what part of the property we're going to use, but we'll get the band program a good practice lot. But I would just rather wait, because like I said, we'll have to get with the architect and see what they designed for this project for the high school. So the recommended projects, we talked about the Crossroads program, a portable building at the El Centro location. We do want to move forward with the emergency response radio system. That's the antennas. We need lighting at our bus annex parking lot for our employees that come in extremely early. This is the parking lot that's right across from De Zavala. A portable for training space for our transportation people. We have a portable out there that does not have a working restroom, and the floor it's been out there for a while, and the flooring is compromised. And then finally, in my conversations with Lisa Frankie, we had TF Harper come out and look at ADA playground equipment for all our elementary campuses, and this would take the existing playground and just create a space off of that existing playground and install ADA playground equipment there. We think that's a good investment. It's accessible. We'll make sure that it's accessible. But that actually came from Lisa Frankie and her group. So the budget, what it looks like, the original budget was over $5 million. So far, projects completed, including the $1 million that we allocated for new central office, is at 4.1. We have just over 900,000. The recommended projects, the portables, the ADA equipment, playground equipment, represents about 832,000. Would leave us with a balance of about 82,000 to do whatever else we wanted to do or needed to do, or if any of those projects ran a little bit over. So, like I said, I wanted to share this with you this evening because I know there's some agenda items on there. I wanted to give you the backstory on it and see what y'all want to do. I mean, we're giving you the recommendations, and it wouldn't be any kind of approval other than you approve the contracts that we'll present to y'all in 2 weeks.
Mr. Sandoval, ask a question. Thank you. When do you recommend we would do the band practice lot? That's been
I'm sorry?
the band practice lot. When would you recommend we do it?
Well, so once we get the architects on board, we start doing the design here for the high school and figure out where the best place for that lot's or that practice pad is going to be, and then include that as part of the construction. So it's not going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. It'll probably be after that, based off of design and bidding out contracts with contractors. And
No, that starts in July. I mean, it wouldn't be ready unless we were doing it right now. So what kind of input have you gotten from the band directors who use that?
I have not spoken with band director yet.
100 of students? No, 200
But
students.
you'll get input from them.
Yes.
Any other questions?
How long are portable buildings generally reliable? How long do they last?
Do you know how long portable buildings, when did we do that one in transportation? Do you recall how long that's been there? So, 15 years.
But perhaps it was good for 10, is what we're saying?
About 2 years ago, we shut down the restrooms and we proceeded with caution in that building. I mean, we still use it, but it's just, there's areas that we don't step in.
Okay.
Anyone else?
What's,
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval.
We've got a budget workshop next.
We're going to have a presentation from Moat Casey first, but I've got to figure out how to get this up on the screen. Oh, I think Greg's got it for us.
Right.
This is very exciting. Don't look at it.
I don't know. No, I'm.
Hello, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, yes, we can.
Denise, go ahead and let me know when you want me to get started.
Are we ready? Let them know when we're ready.
Just about.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready. We're ready to
All
start.
right.
Well, we'll see. I don't.
Wonderful. Well, my name is Josh Haney. I'm with Moat Casey. I've presented to y'all, I think once about maybe a year or so ago, doing a revenue projection update with Mike. Denise wanted to bring me back again to give you guys an update on what happened during the 88th legislature. And despite a lot of finger pointing and back and forth and arguing, not a whole lot really happened, particularly on school finance. Which is a little disappointing given the surplus that they had access to, unprecedented levels of surpluses, $27 billion in GR, $33 billion in GR, $27 billion in the rainy day fund. So a lot of money that could have been put to good use during the regular session is still sitting on the sidelines. But I'll start with going over some of the items that are in the budget. Denise, if you want to go to the next slide.
Who's doing the slides? Okay.
There you go. Back one slide. Perfect. Okay. So the items with check mark indicate that they are in the budget, or there's money in the budget, and there's a bill authorizing that spending. So we're continuing the current law compression. This is the compression that was put in place by House Bill 3 in 2019 and tweaked a little bit in House Bill 1525 in 2021. That compression is bringing down your tax ceiling, the tax compression ceiling statewide. That costs about $5.3 billion. So they're continuing that for the next biennium. That will have implications for the tax rate that you all adopt and the tax rate that goes in your notice. I'm going to be working on that notice later on this evening and getting that over to Denise for her review this week. And so that this decision to continue on that that current law tax compression will impact the rate that you ultimately adopt later on this summer. But we did get an increase in the golden pennies. So I think last time I spoke to y'all, I talked to y'all a little bit about the way your M&O tax rate is structured. There's a tier 1 portion and there's a tier 2 portion. Within tier 2 is a portion that's called the golden pennies. They're called golden because there's no recapture there and they're more valuable. You get more state aid for those golden pennies. They're increasing the yield, and again, that's due to current law. The yield for those pennies is tied in part to statewide property values. So as everybody's property value has gone up recently, the yield on those pennies are going up as well. So you can see currently at 98.56, that's going up to $126.21 next school year, and then $129.52 the following school year. This is really the only new money that's coming, the only substantial new money that's coming. Everything else is not really going to give your district more money to spend than it had in the prior year. The legislature also appropriated some additional money for TRS Active Care to maintain annual premium growth at less than 10%. They also passed House Bill 1605 that authorizes TEA to create what they're calling open educational resources. It's also referred to as the Amplify bill in the Capitol, and that they're a online or a curriculum provider. And they are, this bill will, the state will essentially create educational curriculum for districts to buy, and in this bill is also an allotment to help offset the costs of that open source curriculum. That includes the money to buy that curriculum, as well as money to purchase that if you choose to use that curriculum. Districts do not have to choose. Districts do not have to make that choice. The state also restores money to the Instructional Materials and Technology Fund. Last session they cut that funding. This session they are restoring it back to historical levels. So that'll help you buy the items that are included in those proclamations from the state, as well as those other allowable items for that fund. The other tiny bit of new funding that we got this session was in House Bill 3. That's the school safety bill. So we got a little bit of new funding here and a whole lot of new requirements. And I'll talk about that here in a moment. But essentially what that does, right now, the school safety allotment is $9.72 per ADA. This bill kicks up to a whopping $10 per ADA, and then districts also get $15,000 per campus. But for that little bit of extra funding, you got a whole lot more consequences and obligations from the state. The budget also includes an increase in what's called the new instructional facilities allotment. That's funding that the state provides if you are opening up a new campus, a new instructional facility. You can access some money for things like the furniture and otherwise equipping that facility. Some things that are in the budget don't have a bill that authorizes the spending. And so that's what's represented on this slide. So these items are in the budget. There's money set aside, but there's no bills that authorize that spending. So the big ticket item is obviously the property tax bill. That went down hard during the regular session. They're still arguing about it during the special session. And there's $12.3 billion in the budget that's waiting for that. For the legislature to come to an agreement, figure out how they want to divvy up that money and provide property tax relief. There's also $4 billion in school funding increases. That again is in the budget, but House Bill 100 during the regular session failed. So no basic allotment increases, no funding for teacher pay increases, no new allotments, no increases to existing allotments. All of that is on hold because the conversation, as you all are very likely aware, got derailed due to the next item I'm going to talk about, vouchers. Vouchers really sucked all the oxygen out of the room during this regular session and really put every public education policy discussion on hold because of the fight between the governor and really folks in the House over the provision of vouchers. So there is money for school choice, and there's money for vouchers in the budget right now. Of course, that money's not going to get spent again unless there's a bill authorizing that, and no bill has passed yet. The governor does intend to call a special session on school choice, and so we'll be having that fight later on. There is money on for virtual education. This isn't really new money for virtual ed. It's just there's some virtual ed programs that are funded based on completion. A version of 681 would have struck the completion-based funding and moved all virtual ed over to ADA-based funding. And so that $50 million is really just for that. So this slide is really, if you tuned in to any of the budget debate, which if you didn't, congratulations, you had a better past couple weeks than I did. But unfortunately, I did tune into those budget debates, particularly on the House side, and I kept on hearing this point being made that this budget, House Bill 1, represented the largest increase in public education funding in a generation, yada yada. Right? They kept on talking about all this new money that was coming into pub ed, and I just want to point out they're including things that we don't traditionally count as new money for schools. They're including things like funding enrollment growth. Right? That's just funding the formula. That's not new money into pub ed. That's new students, and so that generates new dollars. Again, not new money for pub ed. They're also including things like those TRS appropriations that I mentioned earlier. That's not money that's really going to the classroom. That's just funding for state benefits, sort of rein in the costs. And so they're including all these items in sort of the dollar amounts that they're putting out that aren't really going into the classroom in the way that folks listening would understand as new money for pub ed. It's not going to allow you to do a whole lot of new program enhancements or anything like that. So this is the slide here, this is the way we look at the budget, okay? This is what I think is a more truthful way. This is just Article 3. So Article 3 is the pub ed portion of the budget. And it's just the state aid that's delivered to schools through the Foundation School Program. The 87th legislature, that would be last session, compared to the 88th session, which is what just ended. This is regular session to regular session, apples to apples comparison right here. And you can see, clear as day, it's not the largest increase in pub ed funding in a generation. It's actually a $3.1 billion decline. So just kind of want to set set some facts straight and make sure folks all across the state are understanding what exactly transpired during the last session. Go on to the next slide. This is House Bill 100. We've sent out a ton of information to districts about House Bill 100. When it came out of the House, it had about $5 billion in actual new money for schools. When the Senate got its hands on it, they put vouchers in it and stripped out a lot of the new funding. And then it went to conference committees, so the House and Senate kind of work out those differences. Those talks ultimately broke down, and so nothing happened. That was the fate of House Bill 100. Moving on to House Bill 3, that's the big school safety bill. So again, I touched on this already. There's some new funding there, $9.72 up to $10 per ADA. Additional safety funding of $15,000 per campus. So that's the silver lining here. There's a whole lot of new requirements in House Bill 3, including sort of the headline is it requires all districts to have at least one armed individual on site during regular school hours. There is a provision that allows schools to obtain a good cause exception. We're going to need to wait on TEA for some implementation guidance on what exactly that exception is. It requires districts to set up an alternative standard to meet this requirement. We don't think that really gets districts out of having an armed individual on the campus. But again, the details are going to come from TEA on that. And so we'll need to sit tight and see how TEA implements that. But I think districts should start expecting, I'm sorry, go back one real quick, Denise. I think districts should start expecting to having to have to comply with this armed individual requirement. Also, it allows TEA to install a conservator if your district's non-compliant. They can come in and just like what they're doing with Houston and La Jolla and other districts, they can install a conservator to sort of force you to comply with those safety standards. Additionally, if you don't comply, they can take the bond. If you go out and sell a bond, and let's say you promise your community you're going to build a new high school, the state can now come in and say, no, we're going to set that money off to the side. You can't build your new high school. You're going to come and comply with all these state safety standards. Okay, next slide. I touched on House Bill 1605 already. That stands up the open educational resources that districts can choose to purchase. There's new money to do that through this allotment, $40 per enrolled student. There's also $20 for printing and shipping costs for those curriculum, those instructional materials. I'm going to skip over this one. It's House Bill 2209. This is for smaller school districts. That's not going to apply to y'all. House Bill 3708 is again sort of small potatoes. This is just if you have homeschooled students that want to participate in UIL athletics, they can generate some funding to offset those costs. Senate Bill 1647. So as I mentioned earlier regarding virtual education in Texas through the local remote learning programs. This is the program that was established by Senate Bill 15. That expires on September 1, 2023. So if San Marcos is serving students virtually through those local remote learning programs, they will not be funded as we sit here today. Those programs will expire. Because no continuing legislation was passed. We do expect that to be subject of a special session, but it remains to be seen when the governor will call that and if they're able to come to any agreement on that. The one virtual program that did get continued in Senate Bill 1647 is if you're doing dropout recovery. You can do virtual dropout recovery through Senate Bill 1647. But all your sort of normal local remote learning program, virtual ADA, if you guys are doing any of that remote synchronous or the other virtual education, that cannot be, that will not generate funding anymore. Okay, next slide. I'm actually going to skip over this just in the interest of time. Denise, I'll visit with you on these next two bills. They're going to impact some of our truth and taxation work, actually next year mostly. Yeah, let's stop here on House Bill 1. So as I mentioned, the legislature couldn't agree on the property tax bill during session. They still can't agree. The Senate's going to come in out of recess tomorrow morning to figure out what they're going to do with property tax relief. Essentially, the House and the governor want to provide property tax relief just by reducing district tax rates. The Senate wants to also reduce district tax rates, but they want to add in an increase in the homestead exemption, right? So you guys may recall, we very recently increased the homestead exemption from 25K to 40K. The Senate wants to take it up to 100,000. Okay, and so the Senate, to increase it up to 100,000, is doing a little bit less tax compression. So the House wants to do 16.2 cents. Senate wants to do 10 cents, along with the homestead exemption increase. And that's really the fight that we're having right now. And it's gotten pretty bitter between particularly the governor and the lieutenant governor. And so it's the governor and Speaker Phelan in the House are in one corner. Lieutenant Governor Patrick is in the other corner. They're duking it out over how to provide property tax relief. One quick note here. If the House version, the House and the governor's version of the bill pass, House Bill 1, this is going to be sort of unique in Texas history where, because this is going to pass, and then in House Bill 1, that has to go to the voters for approval in November. You guys are already going to have your rate adopted by then, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to adopt your rate, then your assessor collector is going to, after the fact, reduce your rate, and then use that reduced rate for the tax bill that they send out. Okay, so the rate you adopt will not be the rate that gets levied if House Bill 1 passes and governor signs it and you and it's approved by voters. Sorry about that. Let's move on to the next slide. I just got a couple minutes here. I'm at the Austin airport. I got to go hop on a plane here. Denise, can you go to the next slide? So here's your revenue projection. You can see the impact here. Some of the concern that y'all had was about the compression, how that would impact recapture. You can see your recapture goes away if House Bill 1 passes, but your funding stays the same. Okay, and there's a little bit of an extra, you can see under other programs, it's 0.1 million, $100,000 there. That's essentially a hold harmless to offset the impact of that. There's a little bit of adjustment there for your recapture reduction. The point is, the point I want to make before I sign off is that 100,000 will go away. It only lasts for 2 years. So it's a 2-year hold harmless to offset the impacts of that compression. But then after that, you will lose, you'll essentially, the cost of House Bill 1 would be around $100,000 for y'all. And so, but in the first 2 years of House Bill 1, it will maintain the same revenue. There'll be no losses for that bill. All right, I'll pause for any questions, but thanks for having me. And y'all, yeah, thanks for bringing me in, and let me know if you guys, if there's anything else we can do to help y'all.
Thank you.
Questions from anybody?
I do have one question. The House Bill 3 non-compliant
Yeah.
punishment of taking our bonds away, has that been done in other I'm not familiar with that. Is that something that the state has done in previous legislation, or is that new for the safety compliance?
I don't know, can you hear us?
Could you hear us?
Josh, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, 1 second. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I had to switch over to the other Wi-Fi. Yeah, so the question was about House Bill 3 and the bonds. You were asking if it...
Yeah, that I've never heard of that before, the state taking bonds that we've had through elections. Is that something that they put into effect specifically for this safety measure, or have they used that in other cases that you're aware of?
It looks like he probably got cut off. Yeah, he's at the airport. There he is.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I had to switch over to the airport Wi-Fi here. Yeah, so the question was about the bond proceeds and if that's been done before, essentially. Was there a second part to that?
Yeah, has that been used before in other legislation to hold school districts to
Not,
non-funded
not that I'm
mandates?
aware of. No, we used to have in Texas this thing called local control, where they would actually somewhat trust districts to do their jobs and pass bonds
Yeah.
and, you know, respond to the, the interests of voters.
Sure.
And that seems to be eroded more and more every session. So that has not been that has not happened as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Thank you, Josh.
I do have a question sort of based on it, but it's our district specific, so I thought I would ask, and it might be for you, Ms. Frank. The virtual dropout recovery program, and I'm not sure who it's for, actually. It seems like our Phoenix program includes a lot of virtual instruction. Are we using that exception of the virtual dropout recovery to include that or not? Or is it because it is on site?
Yes.
Okay.
They're in person.
They are in person
However,
doing
we
virtual?
did explore
Okay,
a virtual component, and this is something we will explore potentially.
okay, but because Phoenix is on site, even though they're doing virtual on site, it doesn't have to be through this sort of an exception, okay. Okay. Not considered virtual, thank you.
I also have a question related to the security. So with the school marshal plus what we already have in place, are we already meeting the requirements then of that new?
My read of that legislation is that we have to request an exemption if we're going to use a school marshal program because they are concealed. But that was, I could be wrong. Does anyone have other information?
Step down.
We can find, I know we're gonna have one-on-one conversations with everybody.
Yeah.
I think, like, the gentleman said, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the.
Okay.
I think we will have
Thank you.
to fill out an exemption
Because they are
with them
concealed.
saying we are in the process of doing it. I don't know anybody's gonna meet that requirement unless you already have school
already did it.
marshals. I mean,
Unless we have SRO, other school districts that have their own police forces and that have SROs.
correct.
And
But they don't necessarily have, I'm not aware of SROs, even in Houston ISD, they only had SROs at secondary schools. So they had 282 schools. I don't know anybody's gonna be able to meet that requirement. Of course, HISD got taken over, so.
I guess Texas can. Sure,
Well, I'll be
TEA
curious
can.
to see what happens with the Morath that owns the district, if it's not meeting the requirements. If TEA is not enforcing it.
Thank you.
Ready? Okay.
I
Hi. Okay, so tonight we have a brief presentation. I had a couple of slides in here because I didn't know that Mr. Haney was going to be able to speak on the legislative updates. So I'm going to go ahead and pass those up because he did talk about these already. That was the House Bill 100 that did not pass, and then, of course, House Bill 1 with the tax compression. And this is one of his slides as well that he showed about House Bill 1 and how even if it does pass, our total revenue rate is still going to, our total revenue is still going to be the same at $76.1 million. This is a slide that we showed at the previous board workshop, and we were kind of going with the bottom where we were saying that House Bill 100 was going to pass with a basic allotment increase. And as you know, that didn't happen, so we're reverting back to the 6160 basic allotment, which ups our recapture to 8.7 million instead of the 7 million. So again, our revenue projection with current law, because we don't know what's going to happen until November or so, we're still looking about $79 to $81 million for our revenue projection.
Can I
Yes, ma'am.
interrupt real quick? So 76.1 million versus what you show there, what am I missing? Your previous slide has revenue at, right?
This is Mr. Haney's
Okay.
projections.
Okay.
That's with the information that he's received so far.
Okay.
So this projection is what we were looking at with our district information that we have so far. So it's, I mean, I really can't tell you what exactly it's going to be. So this is just a estimate that we had come up with previous. And then this slide is what Mr. Haney provided us this morning.
Okay, two different people's projections.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. And this one here was, we had projected this earlier.
Thank you.
Okay, so on this slide, and I did give you a copy of this because I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but this is just a fund balance history. I wanted you to kind of see, on the first column is in 2016, 2017, our fund balance started at $35 million. And in 2020, ending 2022, our fund balance was up to $48 million. In the very last column in green is just what I'm projecting as I'm looking through our general ledger and seeing what we've paid to date, what we've received to date. I also have to be sure to make sure that I am including anything that we have not paid yet. So I'm looking at encumbered funds, I'm looking at accruals, I'm looking at everything that we're gonna have to pay up to June 30th. And right now, I am projecting that we're actually going to take away from fund balance this year. Every year, we've been able to put back into fund balance, and this year, I'm looking at about an $875,000 decrease to fund balance. Now, that's all going to be dependent on that House Bill 1 and how that passes. We could not have that deduction, but we just don't know what that number is going to be. But that's what I'm projecting right now. So that is the number that I'm going to use projecting our fund balance moving forward.
And Denise, just to be clear, you're talking about the $8.7 million
Yes, sir.
recapture payment.
Yes, sir. And so the 8.7 is our projected recapture for 23-24. This fund balance that I'm talking about here is for ending 22-23, which right now is about $7 million. But we just don't know what that number's going to be. So that's what I'm using that projection for this fund balance sheet right here.
So this 1937, that's this 1,937,34, this can go up, or is it more likely to go down?
I'm sorry, which number?
You're looking at a different page. Look
Oh.
at the one before.
Look at the fund
I
balance.
thought we were on the.
No,
this
it
one.
doesn't have
First.
it. Her color code is not on the printout.
Oh, okay.
Oh, did it not
We're right
print out?
here, okay.
That's okay.
Okay,
But that, okay, I see the projected.
okay.
So, Brian,
Go ahead.
so, I've been spinning the budget around in my head and just looking at like the 2021 to 2022 numbers. So, we went in with a budget deficit of 3.2 million. Our final budget was a deficit of 11.4 billion.
So in 2021, is that what you're looking at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on the top part is your budget. So we went in with, our final budget amendments equaled a deficit of 3.2 million. But when it was all said and done, we actually received 83 million in revenue, and our expenditures were only 78. So we ended up putting back into fund balance $5 million because we didn't expend all of the budget that we had.
Okay, well,
Does that make
that's
sense?
kind of what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how we start out with a deficit of 3.2 million, and then we end up having an increase in our fund balance of 5.6 million, which is a difference in my brain of, almost 9 million, so that's.
So in that particular budget, we did have central office budget in there for the $7 million. And since we didn't do it, that money came back.
Okay.
And then that also includes any like vacancies that we never filled throughout the year. Usually our budget, we don't spend 100% of that budget.
So when when creating the budget, what is your expectation? Is there a percentage that, I know back when, when I do my budget, I usually have anywhere from 5 to 8% that is a kind of pad, so to speak. But my budget hasn't ever been this
I know,
large.
that large.
So I'm just trying to figure out why we go in with a deficit budget and then we end up with a surplus. Because logically, I struggle to wrap my brain around that, and that happened since 2016, all but 1 year, which was the 2018-2019. And so, I don't know, do we need to get better at predicting what our actual expenditures and what our actual revenue is going to be?
I would say yes, because it's just very hard to predict what we're going to spend. We send out budgets to the departments, to campuses, and they give us back what they project that they need for that year. Sometimes they don't need it all, or we find we get grants, or we might get other sources to be able to pay for things, and so we don't use all of the budget that we have adopted in the first place. So yeah, I say it's a combination of things. There's things that we just don't know, and then we're able to get money from other streams to be able to pay for things.
Okay, because, if I'm just a normal everyday taxpayer and I don't have the advantage of sitting into these, I would look at the Board of Trustees as pretty much incompetent when it comes to doing a budget if we're going to be so far off. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing I would like for us to get better at in the coming years, is so we don't have this big gap of what we expect to spend and then what we actually spend and what goes into what becomes an increase in our fund balance.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I think we do pretty well projecting, but we don't control teacher vacancies. I mean, the state has a $32 billion surplus all of a sudden, so the state doesn't
Do a good
do
job
a good
projecting.
job. They just mysteriously found 32 point something billion. So I think you're asking us, you're trying to get us to do something that the state can't even
I think we can be
manage.
better than the state. I
I
have a
think we
question
can do
about
better,
this.
but it's hard to, we do apply for grants. The bond passed, so we recoup, but we put that in the budget. They're not small expenditures. Unfortunately, this winter, we had an issue at the high school with $300,000. I mean, you don't plan that.
There's so
Like,
many
there's no one
variables.
purposely saying, let's just make the Board of Trustees
Understood,
look
but
like they don't know what they're doing, and by miscalculating a $300,000 water heater, nobody knew it was gonna go out. I mean,
There's just so many variables that happen.
would you rather us not, my question is, would you rather us not be putting money in, or this is the first time in 7 years where we're actually, I think, potentially gonna be taking money? I think we have done a good job having conversations.
So I have may I, don't mean to interrupt anyone, but I think that Ms. Gonzalez has a lot of data, and that there is some information in here that could be extremely useful in all the data that you have, not just here. Because when you look at this timeline, there is no order. There is no clear understanding of why one thing is, 1 year it has surplus, 1 year has this, 1 year has that. But among the data that you have, I would imagine that someone that could analyze that data would find out where specifically we are under budgeting, and where specifically we continuously have amendments to our budget. And I think that that would be valuable for us to do as an organization, to look back at these years of data that you have access to say, is there a trend? Do we consistently under budget in this area and have to have amendments for this area? Or is there no trend? Is there really just no trend to the numbers at all? Because when you look at this, there is no trend, right? This is a random number generator. And so can we use the data that you've collected, and I think, you clearly do a great job of collecting these data and presenting them to us in the best way that you can, But can we now use those data to find out if there are trends in the way that we are planning and the way that we are executing that we could be better? Because I understand the argument that Texas doesn't do a very good job of it. Texas doesn't do a good job on a lot of things, and I would like to see San Marcos be better than that, particularly in our education system. So I would like to see that, and I don't have the answer for how to do that, but I do believe it exists, right? I believe we have data. I believe that we have people, we can access people who can do that kind of an analysis to see where we have been off over the past 5 years. And is there consistency among it? Because without looking at that, it's everyone's guess, right? And I think that there's value in trying to get better than this under-over kind of thing where we're making amendments every meeting, which maybe we should be able to plan for better. Maybe we should be able to look at our budget and say, well, why are we saying that a band of, 200 students needs $165,000? Where did that number come from? Why does the athletics department, all of these things that are on this list, they were budgeted in some way, and have we been consistent with that or not?
Ms. Villalpando?
We track, maybe we should show what we track. So we do monthly tracking, like, you're at 20% of your budget, or you're at, like, Denise and her team, they do track that. Maybe that's what we need to show y'all, but we show y'all a lot of stuff. I mean, we show you a great deal of information.
I'm not accusing you of not showing it to us.
No, I'm just saying, but you made the comment that maybe we should do these things. We do these things.
Understood. I'm talking about a sort of a more advanced data analytics than what we currently have been presented with.
Yeah,
And what I was saying, that wasn't meant as a dig to you guys. That was really just me trying to figure out and understand how we can have that difference. If I go into a budget with 3 million plus deficit and I end up coming out with a 5.7 increase, then I'm like.
Well, I think part of the issue too that I see in this, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Margie.
No, that was it.
And, is to say that if we are better able to present this to the people of San Marcos to understand that we are not overtaxed, right? I think that this is evidence of a lot of things. I think there's evidence of a lot of positive things in these numbers that we are not presenting well. And I think if we understood them better and we understood how we got to them better and the trends that we have seen in them over the past 5 years better, then we would be better equipped to speak to the other people in San Marcos CISD.
Ms. Villalpando, you've been waiting.
My comment is resonance because I think this is, I'll have Denise say, maybe I'm on the wrong track. But I think a big part of it is our staff. And not necessarily all our staff, but when a teacher leaves, when an administrator leaves, and how long does it take? Yes, exactly, to fill the position. And is there money is that part of what's the money that's?
I mean, that could be it, because when we don't staff vacancies, that money stays there. We budget off of a midpoint for our vacancy positions, which is a little high. If we have a first-year person coming in, we're going to pay them lower, so that's additional funds that are also sitting in there that we don't expend.
Well, that's one thing. I don't know what other things that we have in the budget that would cause that kind of, maybe have.
We're about 90% people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most
And
of
th-
our budget is.
And then we
salaries.
also budget for any vacancies, we budget all benefits. Some people don't take benefits, so that's a huge amount of money that doesn't ever get spent if they do not accept benefits.
You have to budget it.
Exactly, that's, yes.
Because you never know who's gonna, take it, and then you never know what staff is gonna need and how long it's gonna take to replace it. Like you said, some staff comes in at a lower, rate of pay. So to me, it's real hard, and it would take probably another staff member probably to analyze
We-
everything.
We partner with Mo Casey. I mean, they are the preeminent school finance organization we have since well before I got here.
Yeah.
maybe you can reach out to them and say, "Well, what's the exemplar district?"
Right. Yeah, we can definitely look at other avenues on doing our budgets, and just trying to find trends and see where we can cut. And we definitely need to do that. I mean, looking at the budget that we're having, we do need to find ways to save and cut moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if, it makes sense, right? We think that these vacancies contribute to a lot of this fluctuation that we see in our budgeting. Data would show us that, and it sounds like we have that data. And then it might allow us to make decisions like, we know we're not gonna meet this, we have seen consistently over the past 5 years, ergo, we should pay more, right? To the people we have, something like that, right? Like, I think that the data that we have could provide us insight to make more informed decisions about how we spend our funds in the next year. But I don't feel like I'm getting that, because when I look at this, I just see a random number generator. And so I think the trends in that would be really valuable.
Anyone else?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we pay for with our health insurance. We do pay for health insurance, as Denise mentioned, that we budget for everyone to take out the insurance because we have to plan for that contingency. Currently, we pay for health insurance for 1,079 of our 1,300 employees. This was what we paid this year, $364 per person, so we do completely pay for the individual employee. This year, our health insurance quote went down. However, next year, it's going to go up a little bit by $31. So currently this year, our monthly cost was $394,000, but for a total of $4.7 million that we pay for employee insurance. We pay for the employee only. Next year, that cost is going up to $395 per person, which will increase from $4.7 to $5.1 million, our contribution to the employee insurance. And that's based on our premium is based on our area. It's set by, TASB sets that premium for us, so we work really closely. We've worked with them over the course of the year to try to reduce some of the ways that some of the resources that we have. But this year it actually went up by $31, even though there was money set aside for, by legislation, we didn't, I mean, that's not really going to impact this, the $31 extra. So that will bring our total up to $5.7 million that we pay for insurance next year. And that's if we continue to pay for the full amount for each employee. You also asked us to talk about longevity for employees other than the teachers that we did. This was something we put together. We discussed what longevity, a possible longevity increase for all employees, not teachers. And we looked at doing an increment based on every 5 years. This is just something we were asked to put together. So it would be incremental, includes only on non-teacher positions. And you'll see in the columns the number of people who have been here for those particular numbers of years. We have this 210 teachers who are eligible for longevity. We have an additional 353 non-teachers in our district who would be eligible for a longevity stipend. We would recommend not an increase of their salary, but an actual stipend. And that accounts for 27% of all employees would be an additional amount. This isn't something we've passed. This is just what you'd ask us to put together for consideration for anyone who is a non-teacher.
So you're saying this would be a stipend for non-teachers?
This would be anyone, correct.
But it is a salary increase for teachers, is that correct?
It's correct, that's correct, yes.
I think one board member brought it up right at the end, and we said that we would request the information.
Yes,
See what
that's
it would
correct.
cost us.
So the total cost, I'm sorry.
Longevity, if we applied longevity, that we applied for the teachers to every employee.
If we did it as a stipend in these amounts, it would be an additional $352,500 for those employees who are not teachers. And I'm talking about a lot of stuff. Any questions about that so far?
So this page is based on your fund balance that you've projected from the previous, yeah? Okay, the 72 ending fund balance for 2023 of actually 53,790.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this sheet I have given you a copy of because I know it's hard to see on the screen. The first column is what was already approved by the board, with the 3% for teachers, the 2% for all others, and the 3% for classified, and the longevity for teachers only is the first column. If you would want to increase to cover the health insurance at the $395, that would be the second column. And then if you wanted to add the longevity only and not the health insurance, that is the third column. And then if you wanted to add both the health insurance and the longevity, would be the fourth column. And if you look at that fourth column, the unassigned fund balance, we're looking at about $1 million after our 3 months operating that we'd have left.
This is the one I'm looking at. $1.9 million.
Yeah. And then the last two columns is our food service, because that is another fund that you would have to adopt on June 19th. And they're actually doing pretty good. And food service is actually the opposite. They can't have more than 3 months operating expenses in their budget. So they are going to be expending on some equipment and other items for their cafeteria next year, some big ticket prices. So their fund balance will go down to a size that's needed and not over the 3 months operating.
So when you were calculating longevity increases to all employees, you did not include food service employees?
They're on there, yes. If you see the second column, or the very last column, that's the food service with longevity.
Right, but I'm asking if she had it up here. Because they're a separate fund, they have to be done separately.
Right, no, they're separated out. Food service and general fund are separated out.
You know, because if you go with everyone, then you have to include them,
Right,
regardless of what budget account it comes from.
yes.
I have a clarifying question, and maybe I'm splitting hairs, but the O&M budget that's broken out has a total of 18,909,359, and O&M on your line item is slightly less, $500,000 less, and I'm curious why.
On what slide, I'm sorry?
On this line, it's, I'm assuming they're the same. O&M is 18,441.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, 18,441,359. On the breakout budget, it's slightly more.
Yes, and if you add the 18,441 and then the Marshall program 468, those two calculate to
Marshall,
the,
thank you. I knew
yes.
you'd know the answer. Thank you.
And the last page, of course, is the one that you were referring to. That just breaks down what all of the O&M amounts are.
Can we get some description on this? How do these funds get allotted? So there's campus funds, there's fixed costs. What do each of these categories, how are each of these categories managed?
So the campus, for sure, we base those, we do have a formula for the campuses, so it's based on enrollment, and then the eco-disc for those campuses. And there is a formula that we put that in, and that gives us what their allotment is. Now, some of them may have just a little bit more money because we do ask if they have supplemental requests, so they might need to outfit a new classroom or something like that, and so we'll grant that money for them to be able to do those type of requests. As far as departments, we pretty much kind of just go what they had the previous year, and we kind of have them do like a zero-based budget to tell us what it is that they're expecting to spend for the next year. I know our maintenance and our transportation went up because of just the cost of electricity, fuel, water, that type of expense. And then as well, some of the campuses have supplemental requests that we as cabinet sit down and we look at them and decide whether that's something we want to approve or not approve, depending on the program and the department.
So departments come from individuals who lead those departments? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And they're based on the previous year's budget, so if a previous director of athletics had asked for a lot of money, the new director of athletics would just automatically get that without requesting it, or?
Well, not necessarily. We would look at to see how much they've been spending in the previous years, and then we give them an allotment number, and then they'll sit down and go through them and see, okay, what are my plans for this next year? What am I want to do? And I mean, if they're come over $300,000 or 400, of course we're going to stop and say, okay, wait, we can't do that. But if it's within, 5%, then we'll approve that.
So these items don't include salaries, with the exception of color guard and perhaps others. I know that the color guard.
None of these on this page include salaries.
There's a contractor who teaches color guard, and their salary comes out of one of these items. They're
Well,
not.
that's contractor. It's not paid. That's different. That's a
So
6,200
other than
account.
that,
Yes.
these are not teachers.
Right.
Okay. And so the funds that are in this are for things other than teacher salaries, with
Correct.
the
Other
exception
than
of the teacher of
salaries.
color guard. And,
It could be travel. It could be supplies.
okay.
Certifications, training.
Yes.
And then fixed costs, can
Yes.
someone give us a description of what those are?
So that
Them are,
these are all the things like our Skyward, our financial tool that we use in our finance department. All of the programs that HR uses, Frontline, ASOP for subs, those are fixed costs that we have to enable to do our jobs. And then the special programs, those are amounts that are required, have to spend. So we have to spend so much in gifted and talented, so much in bilingual, so much in SPED. And these, again, are not salaries. These are additions to salaries.
These are department budgets.
Yes, ma'am. And then other payroll costs are things that I have to budget on my side for sick leave, for retirement, surcharges, for substitutes. The district-wide is also contracted services at the admin level, community engagements, our building lease, we pay meals for athletics students. We pay for their meals. So I think that went up from $5 because we can't find meals for $5 anymore. So that's like a $10 now. And that's kind of hard to do as well. So that amount went up. Any kind of teacher training, leadership training that the campus or the department cannot or did not budget for, we have money set aside for that as well.
I have a question that maybe was addressed before I got on the board. The district is no longer providing supplies, school supplies for students this year.
For this year, yes.
Were we getting a grant that we didn't get or something, or we just chose not to do that?
Just chose to
Okay.
stop doing that.
Do we have funding for students who cannot afford supplies?
The campuses.
The
typically,
campuses
and
are
we
able
work
to
with
do
the
that.
parent liaisons, and we get a lot of donations from companies and organizations, but we felt like it was time for families to move back to absorbing some of those costs. We were having issues with, I don't know if you remember last year, particularly at the middle schools, we had a supply chain issue where we paid and they didn't have paper and things like that, so we felt like it was time to move back.
Will there be an opportunity to have some sort of event where people can get school supplies? Is that I know other school districts do that. I just know because I've already looked at the school supply list. I know how much it'll cost for families, and I know we have a lot of families that will not be able to do that.
Also local programs that provide a lot of that. I mean, Head to Toe is one of the ones that,
Yeah, we're blessed to have pretty good support in the community for getting school supplies to kids. And our parent liaisons are extremely efficient at making sure we get them their supplies. They're really good at it. And high school, it's typically not a problem because Gear Up gets an extraordinary amount of supplies. So we're trying to beg kids to take stuff, pens and pencils at the high school. You'll see them up front, like, take this stuff. We have it's typically, we have not had an issue. We're just moving away post-COVID.
Can we hear a little about what is included in the technology line item? Is this what covers the laptops that students use?
What's the amount?
$1,074,000.
That's probably more the infrastructure, right? The $1,079,000, that's,
Yeah, I think that is more of, I think Greg's
hiding in the back.
Here he comes.
Here comes Greg.
No, that is not what we're using for, like, the student devices. That is more our utilities, let's say our telecom services, our internet access, the fiber connectivity between the campuses. That will go into that. Things like our Microsoft licensing. We do license Microsoft district-wide. All of our licensing, really. And any of the renewals that we have for some of the software programs. You saw some fixed costs like Skyward and whatnot. There's some costs that are similar for us that we just have to continue to pay to keep the lights on or to keep the networks working. So it's not the, like, student technology devices, but it is services that support those devices.
Where are the student technology devices covered in the budget?
It's been a combination of
Yeah.
things. It's been ESSER quite a bit for the
Yeah.
last
Yeah,
couple.
we had been using, we
Exactly.
moved to ESSER.
That's perhaps the gist of my concern. They don't last forever.
Well, we're beginning the administrative pullback of the devices because of the expenses that we've incurred, and
So how will we adjust to not having ESSER funds to cover those expenses?
we'll go back to classroom sets where we control them back again instead of having one-to-one devices. Is really what we're moving. Remember the pre-COVID days?
So classroom sets where students don't take them home?
Correct.
They
We
were
can get a
homework?
better handle of keeping them in better operating
It's tricky
condition.
for high school students and middle school students. Classroom sets seem to make sense for single
Elementary.
teachers. It's a little trickier for. Okay. When will that change? That's not gonna be effective next year, is it? Or is
It
that the
might.
plan? Okay, when will we?
It might. We're having those discussions with we have leadership June 12th and 13th.
Okay. And I guess when you say that campuses have an allotment based on a formula that's based on their enrollment, plus requests, those requests would come from principals?
Yes, yes. Because the principals are the ones that get the budgets, and then they sit down with their team and go over what items they may need additional to their budget that we allocated to them.
Okay.
So as you know, June 19th, we're going to have to approve a budget. So I want to be sure that I have the information available in the right format. Is there, what is the recommendation of the board of what do you want me to bring to present for that night?
I think you've given us a lot of information. Does anyone on the dais have other information they need? I think we have quite a bit. You've done a really good job.
Thank you. Is the health insurance something that we want to cover, the $395 from the
know,
In
360?
the options, right?
Yes.
That's included in your options.
Yes,
in your
ma'am.
green options. And yes, I did have a question about the health insurance. We pay the full insurance for the employee. Do we cover a percentage of dependents?
No,
Just the employee.
just the employee. If you have dependents or if you have optionals, that's on the employee to pay for that. We only pay individual only, employee only.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Be interested in that comparison to our surrounding districts, if that's a typical, I don't know how we compare to other districts regarding
I
that.
don't think anybody covers families and dependents.
Okay.
It would be so expensive to cover everybody.
Do you know if the cost is the same? So if you had a child, it's also $395, or is it less than that? Okay.
Get my stuff.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all think of something, you can send an email and,
Yes, and the presentation from Moat Casey and this presentation, I'll email it to each of you so that you have that presentation as well. And then if you have any questions or you want me to bring a certain proposal on the 19th, please email it to me so I can have that ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
entertain a motion.
One quick question, Mr. Mitchell. You responded to an email from me, and I can't remember if you responded to the whole board when I asked about the cost.
No, because it was only for, I think it was like $2,000.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh. Motion.
Oh, no, I was gesturing over to Mr. Shanks to make the motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Ms. Kane seconds. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? 0. 6-0. Oh, that was very nice.